Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited to invite you or to join you for your lunch hour. And if you're listening to the recording, thank you for giving this some time. I will tell you, this will be probably the most impactful 30 minutes of your day. I can honestly say that from personal experience. So for those of you I do not know, my name is Andrea Bond. I'm a wellness educator with the Juice Plus Company, as I imagine the person who invited you to tune into this is as well. The Juice Plus Company is actually on a mission to inspire healthy living around the world. They have formed what we like to call the healthy living revolution. We really want to make an impact on people's health, and they're sponsoring this event as a way to get education out there, because the truth of the matter is education is everything, right? When we know better, we do better, we make better choices. And that's exactly how my journey personally started. Over 15 years ago, I was I still am a busy mom, I guess, but I was a really busy mom of young children. I have 3 children in particular, an avid athlete and long distance runner. So I love this topic today, especially, and I hope you do. I have literally my pen and paper ready to go to take notes. But I also have a family history of Parkinson's disease. And I share that because I was actually doing the thing I knew to do, exercise, right? That was an important component to living a healthier life, but I didn't understand how the body really worked, especially where nutrition was concerned. And so I like to say I have been on this journey of one simple change for the past 15 plus years. My family and I have adopted so many healthy habits due to the education that we've gained. And we've been able to thrive the past 15 years. I truly feel better at my age in my 50s than I did when I was in my 30s. And here I have 3 adult children now that literally have been able to stay well, avoid sick doctor visits, and more importantly, make really positive health choices that I like to think will carry forward into future generations, my grandchildren in particular. And that is where I think we truly live out that mission of inspiring healthy living and making a positive impact on our world. So I am just going to get us started here, and I am going to let my friend Sean Myers introduce Dr. David Phillips, who will be speaking with us today, and we'll just kick this thing off.
Welcome to the Healthy Living Revolution. My name is Sean Myers. The Healthy Living Revolution is a movement of people who are taking healthy back. We're offering this series to bring some simple solutions and simple education. Our speaker for this episode is a good friend of mine, Dr. David Phillips. Dr. Phillips graduated from Harvard University in 1984, where he earned academic honors and was an All-American swimmer. After graduation, he spent time in a research lab at Duke University, investigating methods for the early detection of pancreatic cancer. He received his medical degree from Wright State University of Medicine, where he was elected to the prestigious National Academic Alpha Omega Alpha Medical Honor Society. And after practicing as a board-certified emergency physician, he came to the realization that many of the diseases he was treating were also very preventable by adopting a healthy lifestyle. As a result, Dr. Phillips used both his academic knowledge and athletic background and shifted his entire focus to the field of prevention in medicine. He has written numerous articles on the important role that nutrition plays in overall health, and particularly in athletic performance. Dr. Phillips has also competed in triathlons over the last several years, winning numerous regional as well as national masters competitions, including the St. Croix Half Marathon, which qualified him to compete in the World Ironman Championships in Hawaii. Dr. Phillips lectures internationally to thousands, sharing a passion with what he has learned about living a healthy lifestyle to people from all walks of life. From weekend warriors to professional athletes, he and his wife Heidi, also an accomplished Ironman triathlete, are also the proud parents of 3 athletic boys, 2 of which have received individual doctorates in physical therapy and theology, and 1 who is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. We want to introduce to you Dr. David Phillips.
Thanks for tuning in. This is kind of a big subject, inflammation, really kind of a big hot topic today. For good reason, because it's really the silent killer. Chronic systemic inflammation really is the root cause of a lot of chronic diseases in the human body. So it's my hope to educate you on both the beneficial effects of inflammation, of which there are some, as well as the detrimental effects in human physiology. And more importantly, what lifestyle changes can we do to minimize the effects of inflammation? Healthy diets and physical activity really are powerful tools in combating inflammation and a whole bunch of other diseases as well. So along those lines, we're also going to address supplementation with whole food concentrates and why I think it is absolutely necessary and how gold standard research really demonstrates this to be a very powerful tool or catalyst in reducing inflammation. And finally, I'll relate just a couple of stories of how powerful whole food nutrition can be and why taking over the counter or prescription anti-inflammatory medicine, may not always be the right way to combat this whole issue. And so I think you'll see that if you give your body the right nutrients and engage in a healthy lifestyle, that our bodies are remarkably efficient machines and they're capable of incredible healing properties. And so inflammation, the Latin root for that is inflammare, or to set on fire. And really, inflammation is a function of the immune system, and it's very tightly balanced with the immune system. So if you've got a healthy immune system, the good chances are that your inflammatory process is going to be regulated. It's when the immune system kind of gets screwed up and you end up with no regulation or no signal response that you end up with chronic systemic inflammation, which can cause a whole boatload of problems. And so, the cardinal signs of inflammation were coined way back, I think it was 25 or 35 BC, and when they kind of recognized the cardinal signs of inflammation, which are heat, redness, swelling, pain, and then Virchow, some centuries later, coined the loss of function due to the pain and inflammation. So it's known way back when, but there's a difference between acute inflammation and chronic inflammation. And these are some of the features that differentiate the two. Acute inflammation typically happens pretty quickly, minutes to hours, whereas chronic inflammation can take days or months to kind of manifest itself. Tissue injury, when it comes to acute inflammation, it's mild and usually self-limited. But with chronic, it can be often severe and is oftentimes progressive over a period of time. And the local and systemic signs, typically for acute inflammation, are pretty prominent. I mean, you can see it. It's pretty obvious, whereas chronic inflammation is typically less prominent and actually maybe more subtle and hard to actually see. And so for acute inflammation, like the stimuli that causes acute inflammation range anywhere from infections like acute bronchitis, that will cause an inflammatory reaction because you end up coughing and stuff. Foreign bodies like splinters, that causes an acute inflammatory response. Tissue trauma, something like a burn of some kind, or immune reactions, kind of like when you get poison ivy. All of those are kind of acute inflammatory processes, and they're actually that's normal. I mean, we need inflammation because what happens is, and this is a good example, that is if you get a splinter, this is really what happens is that when the bacteria get inside your body, it releases all these inflammatory chemicals, that are called cytokines, that actually then recruit in the macrophages and all the cells that help destroy the bacteria. And that's kind of a loop. It ends, once the bacteria is destroyed and the wound gets healed. And that's why wounds typically get inflamed. They swell up because of the recruitment of all these cells into the area to kill the bacteria. So you can think of a normal inflammatory reaction as a protective response involving host cells, blood cells, and proteins. And basically eliminates the initial cause of the cell injury. It removes damaged cells and tissues. And more importantly, initiates the process of repair. And as I mentioned, it's inflammation is kind of induced by chemical mediators called cytokines. And I'm not going to go into great detail what those are. That's like for a whole other lecture. But that is, again, produced by the damaged host cell. The key here is it's very tightly controlled. It's normally controlled and very self-limited. Okay, so what happens if you have an excess of inflammatory reactions? Well, an inappropriate, again, inflammatory response is when there are no foreign substances to fight off, and that leads to autoimmune issues. And so, again, I can't stress that the inflammatory process is tightly regulated by the immune system to avoid this excessive tissue damage and spill over to normal tissues. So we talked a little bit about kind of the things that cause acute inflammation. What causes chronic inflammation? Well, typically the three big ones are persistent injury or infections, kind of like ulcers can set up for a chronic inflammatory condition. Prolonged exposure to a toxic agent. For a while, you don't see it so much anymore, but things like silicosis or exposure to silica causes this chronic inflammatory lung condition. And then the big ones that we see a lot of, the arthritis, is rheumatoid arthritis, is a great example of a chronic inflammatory condition. But the real big one that kind of overlies a lot of these, the big driver of a lot of chronic disease conditions is frankly obesity. And that's a big problem we have today, because adipose tissue or fat cells are very active cells. And one of the things they do is release these inflammatory cytokines, or these inflammatory chemicals that cause all of these problems in the human body. This is what we can get control of. Okay, this is what we have control of, is kind of our own physiology and priming our ability to kind of fight off inflammation. And of course, we know that and this is actually just a slide that's pretty brief. I mean, just pretty much every chronic inflammatory condition or chronic disease condition in the human body is really under the umbrella of chronic inflammation, ranging from cancer to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, pancreatitis. All these autoimmune diseases really kind of fall under chronic inflammation. And so, the traditional way that we've been battling or trying to reduce chronic inflammation or inflammation in standard is just by taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medicine. So you can see here things like Aleve, Motrin, ibuprofen, ketoprofen. Some of these are prescriptions, some are just over the counter, but they cause lots of problems. Non-steroidals have side effects. I mean, they might get rid of pain and some swelling, but they, if you take them over a period of time, they can lead to things like ulcers and liver damage and kidney failure. So really that kind of leads me to the issue of what can we do in our lifestyle? What can we incorporate and put into our bodies and do to our bodies that will help reduce inflammation without perhaps maybe having to take so much medication? And one of the big ones is exercise. Exercise actually produces an acute inflammatory response initially, which is adaptive. It's part of what makes you a better athlete, is inflammation. But over a period of time, they have shown that exercise actually decreases chronic inflammation. So that's why exercising is so important. And just walking is important, because anytime you move your blood, anytime you're stimulating your body, you're allowing your body to adapt. And inflammation certainly is a big key to that. And this actually just was published a couple of months ago, where they found, big research study, where they found that 20 minutes of just moderate treadmill exercise resulted in a 5% decrease in the number of stimulated immune cells producing tumor necrosis factor. And that's one of those inflammatory chemicals inside the human body. So think about that. In 20 minutes with a 5% reduction, you take that over a long period of time chronically, and you've really allowed your body to decrease that inflammation. And of course, foods that inflame. Refined carbohydrates, processed foods, dairy, sugar, red meat, all of these things, unfortunately, which are a huge part of our diets these days, they're inflammatory. They cause inflammation in the human body. And there are so many different diets that are on the market today. The ketogenic diet, the paleo diet, and I'm asked a lot about those diets. And frankly, I kind of fall back on solid research, and really, the one diet that has the largest database of information, observational studies, has been shown to be a very powerful anti-inflammatory diet is the Mediterranean diet. We've heard about that for a long time. And really what it incorporates is lots of fruits and veggies. Lean meats, proteins, fish is a big one because of the omegas, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But again, the key component to this diet is fruits and veggies. And of course, that bottle of wine back there in the back doesn't hurt either, in moderation. But when we talk about fruits and veggies, that's the cornerstone to an anti-inflammatory diet. And you need plenty of fruits and veggies. And based on the most current epidemiological and observation studies, it's now recommended that we should be eating 7 to 13 servings of fruits and veggies every day. And the quantity is important, but the quality, because unfortunately, the nutrient value of the produce that we have today is nothing compared to what we had years and years ago because of soil depletion, etc. This is a great graphic. The amount of iron content in a bowl of spinach in 1953 would be equivalent to a whole boatload more spinach today, because we've lost nutrient value. And that even includes organic produce as well. And so that kind of leads me to talking about supplementation, why I think as a physician, it's really important because of that issue of nutrient depletion. And we're not getting 7 to 13 servings every day, and not in the rainbow of colors, which is what we should be doing. That supplementing with whole food nutrition, not vitamin supplements, but whole food nutrition is really, really, in my opinion, essential. And so I ask people, if I could put exercise into a capsule and you could put it in your body and you get a benefit from it, I'm sure you probably take it, right? Well, unfortunately, that doesn't exist. But we know that whole food nutrition in capsules does exist. And unfortunately, this is like the big wild, wild west out there when it comes to nutritional supplements. I'm sure that there are several of you watching this that you get bombarded with all these different products on the market today. And I agree, it is the wild, wild west. It's really crazy out there. But what distinguishes one product from another, in my opinion, as a physician, is research. And that's why I have been taking this product for over 10 years and recommending it, Health Juice Plus. The reason why I recommend it is because of the body of research. And the research is gold standard, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, top-tier research. And it's been done, it got over 22 years of published research, now approaching 37, with many more studies in the pipeline. And it's been studied at various institutions, 8 countries, 4 continents around the world, at institutions like Yale and Vanderbilt, Medical University of Graz, MD Anderson Cancer Center. As a physician, this is really big for me. I know these institutions. These are high-end institutions that have done research on the product. This is unheard of in this industry. A lot of companies will go to, fairly unnamed institutions to do their research and say they have research. But when you go to Yale and Vanderbilt and MD Anderson Cancer Center, you're dealing with the top dogs. That was a clincher for me as a doctor. And so what's in Juice Plus is 30 different fruits, veggies, and berries, and that's the rainbow of color. I speak to a lot of people who juice, which is healthy, of course, but typically, people who juice typically juice the same 5, 6, 7, 8 things. It's the rainbow of color that's just as important as the quantity. And it's in a capsule. It's concentrated fruits and veggies in a capsule, and it comes in a bottle, but it's not a vitamin supplement. People think it's a vitamin supplement. Well, you do get most of your vitamins and minerals, but you're getting them from the plant source. This is the key, not the synthetic form that our bodies really don't know what to do with unless you have a deficiency disease, okay? But from the plant source, the form in which our bodies are meant to recognize and utilize. But it goes way beyond vitamins and minerals. This is what you get in Juice Plus that you don't get in a vitamin supplement. All the carotenoids and the polyphenols and the flavonoids, things that you get from eating bilberry and black currant, which you don't go around eating every day, right? But those have tens of thousands of plant chemicals that are so important to the human body that we're really tapping into. They're important. So it's the wide variety, the rainbow of color, the natural form in which our bodies were meant to recognize and utilize. And when we're talking about inflammation, this is the newest product the company has. It's all plant-based. It's a plant-based omega. And so the polyunsaturated fatty acids that are essential to our body, we hear about a lot. It's the omega-3 and 6. And typically these are derived from like krill or fish oil. And the thing is that the fish actually have to eat the algae to convert it into DHA and EPA, which is those polyunsaturated fatty acids. But instead of sourcing from the fish, company went right to the algae. So they obtain their omega blends from the algae, and then the rest comes from these cold pressed seeds from pomegranate. You can see in sea buckthorn and raspberry. And that completes the spectrum of the omegas, not only 3 and 6, but 5, 7, and 9. And each of these has a distinct role inside the human body by decreasing inflammation, increasing cognitive functioning, improving cardiovascular wellness. The whole spectrum goes on and on. And I know this is a busy slide. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but I found this fascinating because your diet's typically on the left side. If you look, the omega-6s tend to be pro-inflammatory inside the human body. And that's primarily derived from all of these, processed foods that we eat. And what happens is that when we get more omega-6s into our diet through this big conversion factor using these COX-1 and COX-2 inhibitor, that they basically, or not inhibitors, but the COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes, they convert those omega-6s into very toxic prostaglandins or cytokines that do damage, that increase sensitivity to pain, increase pain and swelling, all kinds of problems. The omega-3s on the right, however, okay, actually work in an anti-inflammatory capacity. And if you look at how the non-steroidals work, well, the non-steroidals like Motrin act to block both the COX-1 and the COX-2 inhibitor. Okay, so that's what decreases pain. The problem is that the COX-1 inhibitors also support intestinal mucosa, so they have a benefit. And so that's why people who take a lot of anti-inflammatory medicine can end up having ulcers. Okay, so you get the decrease in pain, but you're also getting some toxic side effect from it as well. Well, the omegas do the opposite. They block that painful pathway. Okay, so they block the inflammation, but they do not inhibit the beneficial effects of having good mucosa. So you get all the benefits of pain relief following that same trajectory or the same pathway as the non-steroidals. And so I want to pivot a little bit, and I mentioned that the company has lots and lots of research, over 35 studies now. But I want to just tell you a story before I close. And I've got thousands of stories. I just have limitation on my time tonight, but what the story I'm going to tell you is really follows what Hippocrates said. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. What can happen to your body when you put the nutrients in it is amazing. And this is a story, one of the stories of several that I share. This is Shada, who is a pharmacist in the Tucson area, and for years she suffered with debilitating foot pain, to the point at which she would have to take cool packs or ice packs to work to stand on to get through the day. And we, after discussion with her, I got access to her medical treatment plan. And this was her treatment plan from 2012 to 2015. During that period of time, they were trying to figure out what was causing her pain. So during that period of time, she saw over 20 different healthcare providers, multiple differential diagnoses, trying to figure out what it was. Thousands of dollars worth of diagnostic tests from MRIs, bone scans, DEXA scans, thousands of dollars of medications, of which, look at the top, non-steroidals, naproxen, ibuprofen, Toradol, Voltaren, all these compounding creams, none of which was really helping her. And she sent me a picture of her closet. This is kind of her life. And maybe some of you out there have inflammatory conditions and your closets look like this, okay? But the mere suggestion that concentrated fruits and veggies and capsules would have a beneficial effect on her was met by this from her physicians. And I get this because I'm a doctor and we are not taught anything about the power of nutrition. 2 weeks out of 4 years of medical school, that's it. We're just used to writing prescriptions. And if you think food can be as powerful as the drugs we write, well, the truth is it really can be. Not making any promises, not making any claims, it doesn't cure anything. But when you, again, like I said in the beginning, when you arm your body with the right nutrients, your body's going to figure out what to do with it. And so we started Shada on Juice Plus, and over about 3.5 to 4 month period, she was able to wean herself down off of her pain medication, and she was pain-free at the end of that period of time. And, again, I'm not here to profess a cure or anything like that. I'm just saying the body knows what to do with those nutrients. But her story would be just a mere testimonial if it wasn't backed by the science. Here's some of what the studies on Juice Plus show compared to placebo, is that it does reduce these inflammatory markers like monocyte chemotactic protein, macrophage inflammatory protein decreased, RANKS, which is a huge acronym for an inflammatory molecule I can't even pronounce, and a reduction in that tumor necrosis factor alpha that I mentioned early on, one of these big inflammatory molecules. So the research, this is just one study. I got so many other studies, but because of the time issue, can't go through them all. But this is just one study that proves that what happened to Shada wasn't a testimonial. It was a real life thing that was backed by the science. The science shows that it will decrease inflammation in the human body. And this particular study, I just want to mention this because this was fascinating to me. This was a study that was just published looking at Juice Plus and how it altered epigenetic markers that sit on the outside of your DNA. And when I looked at some of these markers, a lot of these markers that were favorably altered had to do with inflammation. Okay, reduction in inhibition of tumor necrosis factor and interleukin-1 and all these that I won't go through with you guys. But over 1,600 genes were positively altered in the individuals who took Juice Plus compared to placebo. In my recollection and in my knowledge, this is the first time that you've ever been able to standardize a product in a placebo-controlled study and show that it actually alters the way your genes are expressed. And you can't change your DNA. Okay, your DNA, you're hardwired to your DNA, but you can change the switches, the epigenomes on the outside. And whether those genes are turned on or not can be dependent on lifestyle. And again, this is the first study that's really ever been shown to do something like this. So I think I would rather, wouldn't it be neat to have a product in your body that would actually turn that switch off before inflammation is even produced versus having to treat it, right? So, this is an incredible finding that I'm sure that more and more research is going to come down the pipe. So before I close, I just want to tell you my issue as an athlete. It's one of my favorite pictures is the one I did the St. Croix half years ago. And, as an Ironman triathlete, we buck up against overtraining all the time. We're volume junkies. I was constantly trying not to overtrain. I was trying to get the maximum amount of training without overtraining, but I was always tired. I was always fatigued. I was always sick and struggling. And that produces a problem because I mentioned inflammation is important because it's adaptive. It teaches our bodies to train. But when you become chronically inflamed as an athlete and you're not recovering and you're not putting nutrients into your body to aid that recovery, you end up with this chronic overtraining syndrome. And I know a lot of athletes that are involved with this. I had this as an issue before I started taking Juice Plus, and it happened to me at Ironman Florida. But a year later, when I started taking Juice Plus, I didn't have this as an issue, and I was actually training harder, believe it or not. But I was getting rest, which is necessary, but I was also putting the anti-inflammatory properties into my body on top of eating a good diet. So, we know that inflammation, again, the cardinal signs of inflammation: heat, redness, swelling, pain, loss of function. But really, the anti-inflammatory things that we can do, things that we can incorporate into our bodies that will help decrease inflammation. Eat more whole foods. You still need to try to get 7 to 13 servings of fruits and veggies every day. You need to exercise, drink more water, get more sleep, and then bridge the gap. I like to say that taking Juice Plus is bridging the gap. It's between the reality of what we eat on a daily basis and a more optimal amount of whole food nutrition that provides those nutrients, which your body's going to know exactly what to do to decrease inflammation. And I haven't even gone into the other studies on Juice Plus tonight about reducing oxidative stress and improving the immune system, because tonight's talk was about inflammation, but there's a whole boatload of studies out there. So, and with Jim Rohn, who I just love, and he said, take care of your body. It is the only place you have to live. And that's true. And it's really true. I put the little kids down there. We need to start with our children, because kids are inactive today. They're not moving around. They're eating a lot of those processed foods. And I think we as parents have a huge responsibility to really start this right with our kids, not just for us, but for them. And, inflammation can start in utero. What mom's eating pregnant, that fetus is getting a load too. So diseases can start off so early, even as in utero. So I think we're finally waking up to this whole issue of it's time to take care of our bodies. Because our bodies are wonderful machines. You just have to take good care of them, and it'll treat you right the rest of your life. So with that, I would like to thank you guys. I hope that this has helped. And again, it's little baby steps, making simple changes that can have huge ramifications for the rest of your life. So I want to thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. That was fantastic information. We'd like to encourage you to get back with the person who invited you to view this webinar and learn more. Thank you again, Dr. Phillips, and thank you all for joining us.
Goodness. Hold on just one second. I just have to share quickly a couple things on that note. It's so ironic what Dr. Phillips shared today, because that's a lot of my story. I mentioned at the beginning that I am a long distance runner, and years ago, my very first marathon, I ended up kind of in the position that Shada was in, and he shared that story. I ended up with some serious injuries at that point in my life. I did not understand the power of nutrition. And so I was kind of exercising as the way to compensate for poor eating habits. I thought, if I ran 20 miles in a training run, I could eat that cheesecake, and my body did deteriorate. It literally cost me thousands upon thousands in medical bills and months of not being able to do something that I love so much. I had to give up running for over 6 months to heal. And so fast forward, the power of nutrition, I'm exposed to this education. And I have since gone on to run 2 more full marathons, multiple half marathons, thriving and feeling so much better because I'm feeling better. And the last note I have to share, that this is just so affirming, and I hope you feel so blessed by this information, because he mentioned epigenetic markers, and what drew me to learning more was my history of Parkinson's I mentioned at the beginning. I had to believe that there was something we could do besides be a victim of genetics. And so I find this education incredibly powerful, and people desperately need it. So first and foremost, if you would like additional educational resources or more information on Juice Plus, please go back to the person who invited you to listen in. But more importantly, this is being recorded. There will be a link. This information needs to be shared far and wide. I know people personally in my life who have ended up with bleeding stomachs and other horrible conditions due to so many anti-inflammatories, so much ibuprofen, just trying to fight off that daily pain that they're facing. And who knew, right, that food, what we've had since Genesis in the Bible, could be really more of the solution. So I hope you enjoyed your lunch, salad, whatever you had, hopefully the salad, not the burger. But if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to myself or the person who shared this information. And I just wish you blessings of good health. Have a great afternoon.